I'm Cynthia James, and this network is about changing lives one woman at a time. Welcome to Women Awakening. I am your host, Cynthia James, and I am so excited to be with you because I have the pleasure of introducing you to extraordinary women that inspire me. These are change makers. These are women who are making their presence known on this planet, and they're way showers. They are absolutely showing to you and sharing their wisdom about the greatness and the grandness that's available when we step into the field of potentiality. So my guest today, and I will tell you how I met her after I introduce you to her, but her name is Lisa Shalett, and she is an accomplished senior executive, corporate advisor, and independent board director with a remarkable breadth of leadership and operational experience with over 25 years in her career, including 20 years at Goldman Sachs, and she was a partner. Right? She's well known as a trusted connector and sought after thought partner. She simplifies complexity, sees around corners, I know that firsthand, and consistently creates value, advising companies of all stages on growth and innovation. Her expertise spans global risk and crisis management, capital markets, marketing, digital transformation, talent development, and government. She is a rock star. I also want you to know that she created and leads extraordinary women on boards. It's an influential peer-to-peer group of community of women, hundreds of women who come together, and they really are about increasing diversity on boards, learning, modernizing governance, and increasing their visibility and the visibility of women on boards. I just want to read this last little thing. She has an MBA from Harvard Business School and a BA summa cum laude in East Asian Studies, Japan from Harvard. Okay, she's brilliant. That's what I want to say. And so, Lisa, thank you so much for being here. I am so excited to have you.
I could not be more excited to be here as well, Cynthia. Knowing you has been a blessing in my life, and I am really, really delighted to be part of this. Thank you.
Well, and ladies, so I just want to talk about synchronicity for a moment, because I get an email from my friend Tina Lifford, who you met on another podcast, who says, do you want to join this, apply for this coaching program? They're going to do a cohort. And I'm like, sure. So Tina, me, Melinda Wolf, who you've also met, and Lisa end up in this group together. Well, it was a love affair. I don't know how great we did in the cohort, but we did fabulous in loving each other. So I am excited to introduce you to her. And so Lisa, I just want to talk about your beginning of your life, because I really, sometimes people think that people who are successful just, dropped in with a silver spoon in their mouth and just became successful. But where did you come from? What was your childhood like?
I've been reflecting on my childhood a lot lately, because actually today is the 1-year anniversary of my mom passing away. And so I'm filled with so many memories, and many of them very, very good. So I'm thrilled that you're asking me that. I grew up in New York, specifically in Long Island. For those of you who know Long Island, hopefully do not hear much of the accent in my voice. I was the oldest of 2 daughters, and was, the daughter of an amazing working mom who was an architectural interior designer and entrepreneur, and a beloved OBGYN. You could not walk down the street without someone flagging down my dad and saying, he delivered you to the offspring they were walking with. They were truly wonderful, caring people, and I feel very lucky for that. I went to high school at Roslyn High School on Long Island. And, it's funny, when I think about my childhood, I had a really life-changing event happen that I think, connects me to all these wonderful descriptors you just gave, but in particular, the one that relates to why on earth did she major in East Asian Studies, Japan? And that was when I was in high school. The vice principal at the time called me into her office one day and seemingly out of the blue suggested that I should represent our, normal high school by competing for a scholarship to go live with a Japanese family for the summer. And long story short, I ended up getting that opportunity. My parents, the parents I just described to you, lost their minds and allowed their oldest daughter to go to the other side of the earth before internet existed, to live with a Japanese family speaking no Japanese, that family speaking no English. And that really was a game changer for me, that made me realize that the world was bigger than Roslyn, Long Island, that the world was much more diverse. And it really kind of made me who I am at age, 16 to where I am now.
Well, I love that. I believe that travel and connecting with other cultures is life-changing, heart-opening, and mind-opening. So I love that. But I would like to know, how did you communicate with this family that neither one of you spoke each other's language? Was it hand movements? What was
It was supreme charades, with a lot of humor, a lot of dictionary carrying, and a lot of patience. And just to set the scene visually, right? At 16 years old, I was probably like 5'8", and my host family was much shorter than that, in light of average Japanese heights, and it was just comical. And I will tell you one other thing that was also hilarious that happened at the time, although it will date me. So some of your listeners may remember, some may have to Google this movie that at the time was very popular called Flashdance.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So if you're viewing this now, you might not make the connection, but at that time I had, somewhat big hair, big curly brown hair. And there I was in Japan. The movie had just gone on its roadshow launch in Japan. And so here I am, this 16-year-old, awkwardly taller than most around me, charading, my way around Tokyo with my host family. And people would stop me for my autograph because they thought I was Jennifer Beals. And like, the visual really didn't lend itself as to why Jennifer Beals would be walking around with this Japanese family, but nonetheless, I would get surrounded, and I didn't know enough of the language to say I'm not Jennifer Beals. So, and I also didn't want to lose my integrity in the process. So, I couldn't do anything about the photos. But when I was asked to sign my autograph, I signed, Lisa, whatever my maiden name at that point, as Jennifer Beals. But it was really a funny time. So, comedy.
Well, I love it. Well, and I can see, because you're little like her and the hair. Oh
Oh
my God.
yeah, it was perfect.
I love that. So I really want to talk about your 20 years at Goldman Sachs,
Okay.
because you're in the C-suite. I mean, okay, first of all, how did you start there, and how did you move to that level to be a partner? Because that's no small feat.
So it's funny, but there's a Japan thread there too. I never was the type of, kid, and some of them exist who see Wall Street and have this dream of getting to Wall Street. As I told you, my parents, like, nobody had any connection to Wall Street. I didn't have any exposure to Wall Street. In fact, I had seen the movie Wall Street, and that made me want to run the hell the other way. And so I was a liberal arts major, as I told you, in East Asian studies. So there was no reason for me to even think I was qualified to, be part of anything Wall Street. Yet I discovered, and it took me until after business school to discover this amazingly, that there was this job called Japanese equity sales. And that job required someone who had Japan expertise. The Japan expertise was much more important than the market expertise, because they could teach you the market expertise, but they could not teach you in a short period of time Japanese language, Japanese culture, Japanese business. And so I discovered that there was this amazing job on Wall Street at Goldman Sachs where I would get paid to talk to smart people about Japan all day, usually from the perspective of knowing more than them about Japan and being able to help them, on behalf of any of the investors that were in their pension funds or mutual funds, to invest well in the Japanese market. So I just got lucky. And that's how I got to Wall Street and Goldman Sachs. Once I was at Goldman Sachs, I was like a kid in a candy store. Not everybody might take to being on a trading floor, but it was just buzzing with activity. There was a hum to it. I loved it. And the thing about it that was so great was that, there was always something new to learn. And even though you went every day and kind of went through the same motions, you had to call your clients, you had to read this, you had to do that. Every day, the information and context you were doing it from was different because there were new variables. The market changed overnight or whatever it was. And so I loved it. And I was taught something very early in my career at Goldman, which was such an amazing culture and such a culture of learning. And that was to think of my colleagues as if they were my most important clients. And as a result of that, in a culture that really valued team spirit, I was always trying to think, how can I help my colleagues be even better, smarter, faster? And I think from being creative around doing that and kind of giving to get in a way, I think that set me apart pretty early. And as a result, positioned me to demonstrate that I did my job really well, that I had a really good grasp on knowledge that could differentiate our franchise and could help our colleagues do the same. I think I got rewarded for that, and demonstrated that I think by playing into the empathy of, to your point, travel and understanding other cultures, there's nothing more uncomfortable than being unable to speak a language and not knowing whether to bow or how low to bow or whether to take off your shoes or leave them on. It gives you a profound empathy, and I think that helped me as a leader as well.
Well, what is so interesting about this story for me is that your heart led the way.
Totally.
You're caring for your colleagues and wanting them to be better, just as you were growing, actually became a gift and a beacon, that brought attention to you. The other thing I want to say to you is, isn't synchronicity interesting to be called into someone's office in high school that then led you to another part of the world, that then led you to Goldman Sachs? That's synchronicity. That's not an accident. Something about who you were to become. Now, I do want to ask you, Wall Street is basically male dominated. How did you manage that?
I have to say that there was a lot of respect given for people who worked really hard and who, performed well and who cared about others. You get used to, you might not like it, but you get used to being the only woman in the room, and you have to learn to take a seat at that table. You get used to, for example, when I worked in Tokyo in the context of Goldman Sachs, I would be the only woman and the only foreigner in the room. And so you learn to use that to your advantage. So for example, I used to call it the talking dog phenomenon. I would always get the first meeting because I spoke Japanese, and the client would find it interesting to want to see this performance. That didn't mean I got the second meeting. So I would always tell my colleagues, the first meeting's easy. Get me the second meeting. And the benefit of sometimes being the only one in the room is that you're remembered. You might stand out, but you also might get ignored and talked over. And so you have to develop a whole network of sanity buddies, I think, to help you get through. And the women partners at Goldman were this amazing sisterhood. And then there's a whole pay it forward. There's a mentorship, and you really try to bring other women up. Um, but for all the rumors of the worst of Wall Street as it relates to gender and women, like, thankfully I didn't experience that. I had amazing mentors, and learned somewhat late in my career to become my own source of self-confidence.
Mm.
And when I got there to that point, and I was already a partner by the time I got to that point, so I wish that was something I had learned earlier. um, I felt like I felt more empowered, and didn't let stuff bother me, tried not to take stuff personally. And I think somehow made my way and took very seriously the responsibility for creating safe spaces and a comfort zone for other women working their way through.
Well, it's really wonderful. And what inspires me about that is that you had to develop a thick skin.
Oh yeah.
You had to learn, as you said, to not take things personally, but you also had to activate curiosity and creativity in order to maneuver through these halls and
Yes,
these
and a
rooms.
sense of humor
Yes,
always.
yes, yes, yes. Okay, so now you are no longer at Goldman Sachs. You are out in the world. I want to talk about your women on boards, because I think a lot of women here might not even understand the power and the availability of boardrooms that are looking for women. But when you founded this, I don't think you thought that there were going to be hundreds of women that would drop into this thing, right? So tell us about the women on boards and why you started it.
I wish I could tell you that I sat down with a plan to start it. This came about more along the lines of kind of reading the signals of the universe, and so call it a form of synchronicity, but also really listening for pain points when they express themselves. So we just talked about a few themes, one of which is women often feel like they're the only one in the room, and it can be a very lonely place, at whatever level you're at. Usually when you're at a more junior level, there are more women in the room, but when you look up, there aren't many women in roles where you can aspire to them. In this case, I left my like intense career, was able to go out and have coffees with people, and ended up meeting a number of women who similarly had left their long careers and were doing kind of a portfolio of things. And one after another, I want to say 15 conversations in a row over coffees, I ended up having a bizarre deja vu experience. It was the same conversation over and over again. The woman would say, "Wow, it's amazing to meet another woman on corporate boards," because I had been very lucky to get on a couple of corporate boards. Because of what we just discussed, Cynthia, I would hardly say that was the most interesting thing about me. There are plenty of other things you could have discussed rather than my being on a board, but somehow that was resonating with women because as they also were fortunate to get on one or two corporate boards at this stage of their career, they were the only women in the room. And so it's still very exciting to meet other women on boards. And so at first I'm like, okay, great, well, let's stay in touch. But like 15 women said the same thing. And so I felt like the universe was telling me, Lisa, you have to get these women together. And if I'm the common link, I will get them together. But I didn't just want to do, drinks or a lunch or something like that. I wanted to make it an extra like educational experience, because I know when women get to the boardroom, they want to crush it in the boardroom. They want to be excellent. They don't want to just get the seat. And so I found an amazing speaker on a topic very relevant to board diversity, which I knew all these women would care about. We got together for lunch and had this amazing experience. And afterwards I gave everyone's email addresses and said, okay, let's stay in touch. And every single woman reached out to me and said, nope, you're going to keep doing this. And so that became a side hustle. This was never intended. That became a side hustle. I'm like, okay. And so it turned out I'm pretty good at coming up with a topic, finding a speaker, doing a fireside chat. And these women trusted me not to waste their time because I brought with it the professionalism that I had learned for 20 years at Goldman Sachs. And so my thesis was, let's get everyone together. Wow, a community, a safe space, a chance to ask any questions. And my goodness, what collective wisdom was in the room. That was a draw. And then this excellence stuff, the fact that people wanted to learn and could learn together. I took it upon myself to make sure that everyone had to leave the room even smarter. Otherwise, I would have failed. And so
Yep.
that enthusiasm, I think, got people coming back. And what happened over time, as you might imagine, was that these women started to say, hey, I know another awesome woman who's on a board. Can they come along? And so by February of 2020, right before the pandemic, this group, by pure word of mouth, no advertising, no website, not even telling people to refer people in, had gotten to 100 women. And then the pandemic happened, you know, geographical constraints removed. This no longer had to take place in New York. It went to Zoom. Zoom was a lot easier than planning like a menu for lunch and security, RSVPs, and all these things. And boards, just like everyone else, were in a state of chaos because of all the craziness of the pandemic. People needed to get together and discuss, like, how do we make sense of things? How, as board directors, do we help our companies in this environment of uncertainty and unknowns and what have you? And so we kept meeting, and as a result, there were a lot more referrals in. And now that group, if you can believe it, is 450 women all over the country, all over the world, and I am so inspired by them and feel really very lucky, as well as a lot of crazy pressure to live up to their expectations.
Well, so you did for them exactly what you did at Goldman Sachs. You created a space where they could thrive and learn and grow and be better.
I try.
Yeah,
That's an
well,
interesting
it's
point.
great. Well, and I got to tell you, I'm on a couple of boards, and uh, it's a gift, and there's things to traverse. But the other thing, and maybe I don't even know, I didn't know this initially, and maybe you, the women in the audience, that there are boards that you can be on where there are paid positions for you to bring your expertise to this board. I didn't know that. It was like, oh, you want me to be on your board? Great. I'm honored. I mean, so I love that you are supporting these women and that they're bringing their expertise and they're bringing that diversity into the room.
Yes.
I also know, I'm changing the subject a little bit here, because I also know that you're a mom,
Yes.
that you have a family. And I would like for you to just talk a little bit about the juxtaposition of managing, being this corporate executive and a loving mother and container for family. How did you find the harmony in that?
You know, I think that anyone who is a working parent, I shouldn't limit it to moms, but I do know that working moms walk around with a tremendous amount of guilt. On the one hand, they may need to work, they may want to work, they may really feel like work is who they are, and so there's an identity part, and you want to be who you are, because then you're not necessarily going to be the best mom if you feel like you're not living up to whatever your calling or your potential is. But I would feel tremendously guilty, and try to manage that as best I could. But I also knew that if I were happy and if I really felt fulfilled, then I would be setting a great example for my kids. Now, it wasn't until, so I have two sons,
Mhm.
and so it wasn't until, I don't know, maybe they were one of them was just starting high school, or maybe end of junior high or something like that, when I would get home in time to put my kids to bed. I wouldn't always get home in time for dinner. And I was putting one of my sons to bed, and he turns to me, says, "Mom, are you the boss of people?" And I said, well, yes, I am the boss of people. How many people? We had a conversation about this, and he had a smile on his face. He's like, okay. And I felt like in that moment, he sort of put two and two together. But now my sons are 20 and 23. They have a much better sense of the working world, and they have a ton of respect for the time I've spent, in my career, and the accomplishments that I've had. And that means a lot to me. And they feel like they can turn to me for things. But, I left Goldman. One of the reasons that I left Goldman was because I really felt like I needed to be home in time for dinner. And I think sometimes it will hit you at weird times. There are some working moms who feel like, what, they need to be there at the very beginning. And I was very lucky. Not everybody has these options, but I was able to get help, such that I felt like my kids were well taken care of, and I could go to work and I could come back. And so I was very fortunate in that regard. But I didn't feel the pull to be home when they were really young after my maternity leave. I felt the pull really surprisingly when they started to get into high school. And all of a sudden, this clock appeared in my head, ticking down backwards from when they would go to college. And I felt like I needed to be there then more. I needed to be home at the dinner table. And by the way, I was right. There's a lot of intelligence that you can gather from the dinner table. And you just want to pay attention. Some of my colleagues, worked the whole way through and they were totally fine. So it really depends. You just can't beat yourself up too much over it, and you have to make sure that you kind of take a self check every year, and ensure that your priorities are in the right place. And I think this past year, right, when many of us have had time to spend with our kids, although it hasn't necessarily been easy. I mean, homeschooling, not easy. I didn't have to go through that. I don't know, maybe it's given us a chance to pause and think as to what our priorities are.
Yeah, well, I think it's really important. And I also think that one of the things that I think is a gift to your sons is that they have experienced a mother who is accomplished and fulfilled and also there for them, which
Yes.
sets into their mindset what relationship can be with a powerful woman. I just think that's an extraordinary gift that you gave them, actually.
Thank you for saying that.
So I want you to tell people how they find you. Before I ask my last question, how do people research you, find you, connect with you?
I think probably the best way to find me is on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
It's funny. There are two Lisa Shalletts. My sister-in-law also has the same name, and talk about rock stars on Wall Street. She is absolutely one. And so she worked at Morgan Stanley. So don't mix us up. I'm the one who was the Goldman person, and was and founded Extraordinary Women on Board. So I think if you find me there, that's great. There's a website for Extraordinary Women on Boards, which is EWOB, for Extraordinary Women on Boards network.com, if you're interested in more information on that.
Beautiful. Well, I ask the same question of every guest. What is the one thing you want women to know about the importance of their awakening?
One thing.
One.
Um, it's hard to come up with one thing, as I'm sure you know, which is why you asked that question. Maybe I'm going to say this. I think it's important not to define yourself or let yourself be defined by what you've done before. I think that women in particular think narrowly and limit their possibilities by defining themselves based on their past, as opposed to how the things they've done and the skills they've obtained can create possibilities for their future.
Love that. I love that. Um, Ladies, I really hope you wrote some of this down. If you didn't, go back and listen again. Um, Lisa, thank you so much for being here, bringing your wisdom and your gifts, and really being a beacon of inspiration.
Well, back at you. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you for this podcast, and for all the ways you reach out and touch and inspire so many women and people. But most of all, I'm just grateful to have you in my life. So thank you.
Thank you. So, ladies, we do these every week. So come back every week and meet another fabulous woman who's doing extraordinary things. And what I want you to know is that they're examples, they're not exceptions. They are showing you and reminding you that you're powerful, that you're beautiful, that you're magnificent, that you're dynamic, that there's no one like you anywhere. You are an original imprint. Therefore, the options are unlimited. So, subscribe to us. We're everywhere. We're on Spotify, iTunes. Um, we're on Spreaker. We're on iHeart. We're on YouTube. Wherever you find us, please subscribe and come back, because the next woman may be just what you need to take that leap into greatness. I'm honored to be with you, and I'll see you next week.